Welcome, Panther Nation football fans, to another edition of Growlin' and Prowlin'. I am, of course, Mr. CeeLo here, talking all things Carolina Panthers, from the offseason to the draft, OTAs, to the preseason, to the regular season, to the postseason, and to the Super Bowl. Let the growlin' begin. Welcome back, you guys. Glad to be joining you here. It's been a few weeks, I know, you guys, but just had to break this news, you guys. Was actually thinking about this today while I was out and about, hoping that Tepper and the powers that be decided to promote Dan Morgan, in which I just received the breaking news that he has been promoted, and as president of football operations and the GM. Well, the reason why I said that Dan Morgan, whom I loved when he played here so many years ago, unfortunately injuries derailed this University of Miami superstar. He was always a guy that I just absolutely thought was the cornerstone of our defense. And then they drafted John Beeson, and he was never able to get right, that being Dan Morgan. I think he had concussion problems and so on and so forth. And then the way Beeson was playing, they felt like, hey, we can do without him. And then Beeson had so many trouble staying on the field as well. But when you're a hard-hitting linebacker, that's what happens. But anyway, looking at this guy, I'm not going to go into his personal journey as much as I am the reason why I'm happy that this guy was hired. Whether many of you Panther fans realize it or not, we were on the up and up. Besides the fact that we got shut out, I think the problem with that had to do with Thomas Brown and the fact that they could not figure out what personnel to get on the field at that time. And it just turned out to be just an absolute disaster of two games. It seemed like Thomas Brown wasn't sure. I don't know if Chris Tabor was attempting to run a certain style, but I'm going to do a show on why Scott Fitterer was relieved of his duty, because the reality of it is he made 4 fatal mistakes that doomed this football team, and I'm going to go ahead and let you know I've got 10, but the 4 fatal ones that should have did him in, along with Matt Rule. I'm just of the essence that I don't think that he had anything to do with Frank Wright. I just think Frank wanted C.J. Stroud, and I would not be surprised 5-6 years down the line this comes out. I think when we heard, I think it was Adam Schefter or John Clayton that mentioned that these two guys were not on the same page, as far as some were enamored with C.J. Stroud, some were enamored with Bryce Young, and you guys know where I stood with it. Any of you guys that tune in, you know where I stood between Bryce and C.J. That has nothing personal. It's just the fact that I saw C.J. Stroud make it look so easy. And even in the game against Baltimore, I've already said that the OC in Houston, he should not get a head coaching job because he's not ready, because he handled that Baltimore game like a coach that had never seen a blitz-style defense. And he held back C.J. Stroud. Really, he really did. And I'm ecstatic. As I said, Dan Morgan, hopefully what we're going to see is that he hangs on to a lot of these guys. And I know people are going to say, why would you want to run it back? Well, one thing we need to do is we need to keep Ichiro Evero. This is a guy we need to hang on to. And I hope that Dan Morgan and David Tepper can come together and say, hey, look, we can't lose Coach Evero. Now, I'm hoping, because, listen, he's got a ton of offers. And the fact is, our defense was great this year. Regardless of what anybody said, we had a top 10 defense. We just couldn't muster up any offense. Now, there were some games the defense was suspect in games, but the run stopping was left more to be desired. It's true enough. But I truly believe that Dan Morgan is going to know what it takes to get these defensive players signed, and he's going to know what it takes to get certain offensive players we need in here. And I will be going down the line in a couple of weeks once the Super Bowl is over. I will be keeping updates on who the head coach and search. But just to let you guys know, I hope we get Ichiro Avero. Everybody's talking about offensive coordinator Ben Johnson at Detroit. Listen, we don't have a Jahmyr Gibbs, and we certainly don't have a David Montgomery. Now, what we do have is a Chuba Hubbard. And as I said, you guys, if we could get Derrick Henry or we could draft Audric Estime from Notre Dame. If you don't know him, look him up. I'm an Irish guy. Look him up. We can get those two back. If we can get Audric Estime and hang on to Chuba Hubbard, then I say go with Ben Johnson. If your idea, Dan Morgan, is to draft Audric Estime, then yes, we hire Ben Johnson. And then I've been hearing, Brian Callahan out of Cincinnati? I'm not sold on him. I will go ahead and tell you guys, I'm not sold on him, and I hope Dan Morgan ignores it, because here's the thing. Callahan is only as good as the weapons around Joe Burrow. And I mean, in the weapons he has, they should have a Super Bowl. Brian Callahan screwed up that game in the Super Bowl. I hate to say it like that, people. Brian Callahan cost the Bengals in that Super Bowl, and Brian Callahan cost them in the AFC title game last year. You run the football. If a team can't stop you running the football, you keep doing it. That's why I thought it was so important that the Panthers should have kept Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks had no reservations about, hey, let's run the football. Hey, let's run the football. Keep in mind, you guys, Carolina destroyed Detroit last Christmas. Christmas Eve. They got destroyed. This was Steve Wilks' team. Steve Wilks' team, people. So we have to look at it from the standpoint that the next guy that we hire needs to be a guy that is going to be a run-first type of guy. Look at Detroit. Jared Goff's not great, but he's good enough. And until we can get... Because honestly, Dan Morgan, I hope you hear this. We're congratulating you, brother. Been a fan of yours for the longest time. But what we need is DJ Shark needs to stay. That's the kind of decision we need. Brian Burns needs to get locked up. And if anybody has any comments about me saying DJ Shark, hit me up. DJ Shark was good when he got the football. The point is, they didn't want to throw the ball deep, and he was a great deep threat. Regardless of what you want to say. A guy can only build confidence when he gets the ball thrown to him. They need to re-sign DJ Shark back. They definitely need to get Frankie Louvu back. Can't let him walk either. Burns needs to be re-signed. Derek Brown needs to go ahead, and we need to get him re-signed. They're saying right now we're projected to have $36 million in cap space. The big thing is what Dan Morgan has to be able to do is come in here and get certain players. The biggest thing Morgan's going to have to do is get some help on the offensive line. He's going to have to evaluate Ike Ekwonu because he had a sophomore slump. Everybody talked about whether he was going to have that, and he did. He was not by any far looking like a first-round pick like he did his rookie season.
That was pathetic.
And ultimately, in my opinion, you may be able to take a top-tier player. But the thing you don't want to do is what Scott Fitterer did too many times. Give up too much stock and don't receive enough stock for the players that you get.
Is that your best?
With Dan Morgan being hired here, I don't know if he's going to be that kind of a high roller or a big risk taker, but I'm happy that he's here because it looks like the franchise is saying, okay, we don't want to get rid of and just overturn this roster. That's a good thing to me. You want to keep this roster intact. There are guys like Shaquille Griffin that played great in his few weeks here. Troy Hill. These are guys that you need to hang on to. I think you need to call Dante Jackson in and say, look, you're gonna be a cap casualty unless you can bring that number down a little bit. So, and I think Dan will have that ability to do that. You know, you've got to get Derek Brown re-signed. You've got a couple of other players that have to be prioritized. And I think Dan's going to be the guy for the job. But, guys, let me know what you think on the hire of Dan Morgan as the guy. Dan Morgan is the official president of football operations / GM. Once again, congratulations, Dan. We know you're going to do a great job. All of us here from Growlin' and Prowlin', I am happy with this hire. Think he's going to do great. Yeah. But get back with me, guys. Hit me up on the Facebook page at Growlin' and Prowlin'. Also, go check me out on my Instagram. Let me know if you don't like what I said, you like what I said, or you don't. But until the next time, you guys, keep prowling the airwaves and keep growling out. Keep pounding.